the old saying goes, not everything that can be counted counts, and not everything that counts can be counted. This saying is basically attributed to Albert Einstein. Nevertheless, the title of the Shiur this afternoon is, of course, concerning Sfirat HaOimel, and the title is, Let's Make the Counting Count. A counting that counts. As we mentioned a moment ago, the topic of discussion will be Sfirat HaOimel, and we're going to try to understand exactly what is the purpose of our counting every day, the beginning of the day, which is after Ma'ariv, and what exactly is the purpose that counting pursues, and more relevant, to whom are we counting? To others, to ourselves? We don't even know exactly not only what the purpose of the counting is, but in the actual counting, to whom are we counting? The mitzvah of Sfirat HaOmer, of counting the days between Pesach, the second day of Pesach, till Shavuos, is a remarkable mitzvah. However, there's an extra dimension to this mitzvah, which we're all familiar with, and that is the minig of Avelos, that which we conduct ourselves with certain halachas of mourning. During the Yemei Svira, we do not marry. Sometimes it's quite difficult. A long period has to go by before we can officially marry off to Chosin and Kala. Also, we do not shave, we don't cut our hair. These are all a type of conduct which we find in Hilchos Avelos of Yud Beis Chodesh, when we mourn and grieve for the loss of a mother or a father. What's very, very interesting is that this din of Niyug Avelos, of conducting ourselves like mourners, is not to be found in the Gemara. It is not a din of the Gemara. It's a takonas ha-go'onim. The go'onim came after the Chasimas Hashas, after the Gemara Torah Sheba'al Peh came to an end. And it's interesting that the takana of these go'onim, even though they had a link with Rabbanon Saburoi of the Gemara, of the latter Amoraim, they did have a type of interpersonal relationship. Nevertheless, they're going to make the takana, and the Niyug Avelos does not emanate in the Sibas Achiyuv, and the reason to obligate us insofar as the Chazal are concerned. Nevertheless, as we mentioned a moment ago, the Takonas HaGoyim of Niyug Avelos was accepted by all elements of the Jewish people. Ashkenazim, Svardim, Teimonim, makes no difference. In Yemen, Syria, all the ages, Klal Yisrael accepted, and they accepted it with a stringency, all the dinim of Avelos that the Go'anim instituted. And it's interesting, very interesting, the Pri Megadim, although there's those that argue on him, but we can't really argue with the Pri Megadim, points out that the Shulchan Aruch says that even though the minig of Klal Yisrael is not to get married during this period between Pesach and Atzeres, nevertheless, we're allowed to be Mekadesh Isha, to have a ceremony of Kedushin. And of course, that does not apply Bismanenu, for the very basic reason is we make everything together. The Kedushin and the Nesuyin are concomitant. So the Mishnah Berurah, that the Chofetz Chaim wrote and authored, asked the simple question. Basically, the Magen Avram asks it, what's the nafkamina? What's the relevance to this halacha? Since we do not have Kedushin separate from Nisuyin. The marriage ceremony, the betrothal, is always done together with the essential marriage ceremony. So the Mishnah Berurah points out that we can make a shidduch and we can have a suda in honor of a shidduch. Shidduchim you can make during this period of between Pesach and Shavuos. And you can also add a Sudas mitzvah in honor of the shidduch. However, dancing and singing is prohibited. So the Pri Megadim in Shulchan Aruch points out that what happens if the shidduch coincides with Chol HaMoed, you have to bear in mind not to sing nor to dance. So of course the Rav of Yerushalayim pointed out that that's very far-fetched, because after all, during the 7 days of Pesach, we have a mitzvah of a samachta b'chagecha, to be happy, joyous, cheerful, and that surely the Go'onim realized, and that was not within the framework of their takana. So they argue in the Pri Megadim due to a very elementary halacha. We're 100% confident that the Pri Megadim knew as much as we did. He also realized that. And obviously the intention of the Pri Megadim is just to point out with what stringency, how far-reaching the Takanas HaGo'enim indeed was accepted upon the Jewish people, that even during Chol HaMoed, they abstained from dancing and singing. And the question naturally arises. It's a question that we have to ask ourselves. What, of course, is the reason why the Goyim instituted the Minig of Avelus? So the Mechaber already points out, and it's a Gemara in Yevamah Samach Beis, that 24,000 Talmidim of the illustrious Tana Rebbe Kiva all died. And they all died in this period of time. Reason the Gemara brings down, we don't understand it, is somehow or other there was not the proper respect and dignity and honor that each of the Talmidim deserved, and the other Talmidim, insofar as every individual Talmud is concerned, somehow were a little bit unaware of the fact that perhaps they're not giving them the honor that they deserve. And of course, Reb Reuven Grozovsky already points out that this is 2,000 years that the Jewish people have established this period of time to be days of mourning, and we do not mourn more than one day for all catastrophes, tragedies that took place in the history of the Jewish people, including the Churban Beis Hamikdash. We only have one day. Of course, we have 3 weeks. There's no question about it. We do have 3 weeks, but not 7 weeks. So we have to come to the conclusion that the 7 weeks that we count the Omer with the concomitant Niyug Avelus, in contrast to the 3 weeks with Churban Beis Hamikdash, is a worse tragedy. That's where Reuven Grozovsky came to the normative conclusion, because it's 7 weeks. And we don't know why the Torah of these great Tanoim, the great masters, was not enough to protect them from this disaster, which apparently is something which we don't understand. We'll soon see. And how is it that the Torah that they learned did not protect Klal Yisrael from indirect calamity and tragedy? True, there was something wrong. We don't know exactly what it is. Insofar as the conduct, interpersonal relationships between the 24,000 Talmidim was concerned, but we believe that Torah is Magnei Umatzlei. Torah protects. And that's why we're learning Torah today. Our motto is that protects Klal Yisrael. Not everyone believes it, but normative Jewish people believe that it protects Klal Yisrael. We see that it did not protect the Jewish people. They were in a spiritual sakana of total assimilation, as we'll discuss later on. So first and foremost, we have to really, really understand that we don't know exactly what took place. And the Gemara says, they didn't show the proper respect one to another, so we cannot understand that literally. And that's what took place, as we mentioned a moment ago, in the interpersonal relationship. It's something that basically relates to us and not to them, because we're speaking about Tanoim, that they all came out of Beis Kodesh HaKadoshim, from the Holy of Holies, metaphorically speaking. And we believe, Be'emunah Shlema, with a total belief that anybody that sat at the table of Rebbe Akiva, the father of Torah She'Ba'al Peh, for 1 week, so he had enough Torah, Yirah Shamayim, and Midas Torahs to last him a lifetime. So insofar as trying to figure out what took place among them, so it's a very, very futile undertaking. We don't know. But what do we know? What Rabbi Seinu HaKadoshim taught us, that there's no din avelus separate and independent. Insofar as the 3 weeks are concerned, so the dinei avelus basically revolve around the loss of the Churban Beis HaMikdash, the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, the loss of that Beis HaMikdash, that annihilation of Yerushalayim. So this is a reason to grieve and mourn every year. However, insofar as the 24,000 students of Rebbe Akiva is concerned, we do not mourn for them, and we do not grieve for them insofar as the loss is concerned. 2,000 years went by. Reuven Grozovsky said it's the biggest tragedy that befell Klal Yisrael, and that's the reason why we have to grieve, but we're not grieving and mourning per se for their loss as we would for a mother or father, chas v'shalom, Rahman al-Itzlan, God forbid. But the purpose that the Gaonim enacted Neo Gavelus during this period of time is for us to arouse ourselves and remember this tragedy. Hayoser Gadol, Rebbe Reuven says, the biggest tragedy of all, to remember and arouse in ourselves the reason for it. And therefore, after we're aroused, we should be inspired that every single individual, whatever he's missing in the warmth, dedication, devotion, respect, and reverence for his fellow man, so he should ameliorate it. Every day that goes by, somehow or other, he has to see exactly what can be improved, and improvement starts with himself. And of course, the question naturally arises, why during the time of Pesach, did this tragedy take place and Midas Hadin prevailed? The answer is that we believe Be'emunah Shlemo, Ani Mamin Be'emunah Shlemo, we all believe wholeheartedly with a complete faith that every day that goes by, we become closer to Matan Torah, to the King of the Torah, to Ma'amad Har Sinai. And this is a living reality. that we become closer on a daily basis to Har Sinai, because the yontif of Matan Torah is nischadesh every year anew. Chag HaShvuyos, Zman Matan Torah Seinu. This is the time of giving the Torah. So it's not a zeichel, not a remembrance. We don't commemorate something that took place 3,600 years ago, but it's a living reality every year. Metaphysically, there is a new Matan Torah. And that is what the Riyah Kodesh said. Simple translation of the words. Vaytiten lonu Hashem Elokeinu b'yavo moyadim l'simcha chagim uzmanim l'sosa. God Baruch Hu, you granted, due to your love of the Jewish people, specific times and holidays. Chagim uzmanim. What does the word chagim uzmanim mean? Zmanim means the time of the festival. Chagim comes from the word mechoygeg. That's the small hand on the watch, and it goes around. Chagim comes from mechoygeg, the hand of the watch that comes around to the original point of departure, indicating that the day of Shvuyos is not because the holiday that we will celebrate of Shvuyos is not because there was once a Matan Torah. But today there's a Matan Torah. It's happening now. And of course, the guy brought down quite well known, the Gemara Daf Kuf Chav Tes in Shabbos told us that the person should not be Mekes Dam Erev Shvuyos. In other words, you should not take a blood test, not have any of a person's blood let out Erev Shvuyos, the day of Shavuos, the day before Shavuos. Why? Because it's a sakanto, it's a danger. And every yontif, unless like the Mishnah points out, it's an emergency, so a person should desist from taking a blood test because it's a gezerah, it's a prohibition on account of Erev Shvuyos, which is also mitam sakana, because it's simply a danger. What is the danger? So the Gemara tells us because the day of Matan Torah, the eve of giving of the Torah, so there was a mazik that went out in the world. He had a shem, he had a name Tavoyach, and anybody that was lax in committing himself to the Torah, he was lax in his commitment to the Torah, so he would be endangered that perhaps Tavuach, the name of this mazik, would severely injure him. So the Goyim points out that the Gemara in Kuf Chav Tes Amud Beis in Shabbos read. It's speaking about the fact that the greatest danger that was posed by this mazik was that somebody who was weak, and by letting blood he became weak. But that has nothing to do with the Chag HaShvuyos. That was the original Matan Torah. This is the way the scenario of Matan Torah unfolded once upon a time. The Gemara says, no, it's a mistake, because now there's also a Matan Torah. We have a Matan Torah today, and it's also a sakon. It's expected of us on Shvuyos to literally reenact, relive, re-experience Matan Torah, and to accept Matan Torah like our ancestor did, Nasa v'Nishma. Complete commitment, unqualified dedication and devotion to the Torah and mitzvahs. And of course, in Tikkun Leil Shvuos, the Zohar points out that Reb Shimon Bar Yochai told his Talmidim on the eve of Shvuos, tomorrow we're going to a wedding, so prepare a gift for the Kala. Who's the Kala? The Torah. What kind of gift can you give her? A type of a Chiddush that she'll enjoy. So we see that he actually experienced Matan Torah. He had his Talmidim of Shem Bar Yochai. And he spoke of Matan Torah in very, very down-to-earth, practical terms, going to a wedding and bringing a gift. According to the Bir Halacha and Shulchan Aruch, the Chavetz Chaim, so he points out that the Chinuch agrees with the Rambam. The Sefer HaChinuch agrees that Sfirat Ha'omer in our time, in other words, today, the period of history that we're living in, is a chiyuv de'oraisa. It's a chiyuv min haTorah. There's a list of rishonim that hold that it's not a takana d'Rabbanan. It is a chiyuv gomer min haTorah. Bir Halacha found it in the Sefer HaChinuch. But it's interesting that the Sefer HaChinuch, when he explains the mitzvah of counting, so he said at the root of this precept, by way of the plain meaning, lies the reason that the entire main element of life in Judaism is nothing other than the Torah. And on account of the Torah, heaven and earth and the Jewish people were created. As it says, if not for my bris of Torah day and night, day and night, Shiur is to learn day and night, I would not have created the heavens and the earth. So we see from the pasuk in Yirmiyahu, the very purpose that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world is in order to facilitate the Jewish people to learn Torah. Without Torah, he would not have created. That's the purpose of the world. Learn Torah. And this is the principal element, says the Chinuch, why the Jews were redeemed from the land of Mitzrayim in order to accept the Torah. And if it wouldn't be for the overall purpose of Kabbalah HaTorah, so the Jews would not have been redeemed from Mitzrayim. And it's for this reason, because it is the main core of Jewish life, the Torah, and for its sake were the Jewish people redeemed from Egypt and rose to all the distinction that they attained. We are commanded to count the days from the morrow after the festival day of Pesach till the day that the Torah is being given, to show with our very souls our great yearning and longing for that distinguished day for which our heart longs, as the servant eagerly longs for the shadow to be released. And constantly counts and reckons when his longed for time will come, when he will go out for freedom. For counting shows, counting shows about a person and all of his hope. His entire purpose is living that hope of deliverance, and all his desires, his deep desires, is to reach that time. Somebody is in prison, so he counts the days, very enthusiastic, they go by, that bring him closer to his release date. And the Chinuch actually asks the question, it is so strongly an expression of yearning and desire to come to that great day when we get the Torah, when we receive the Torah, that the count should have been a countdown, 49, 48, 47, 46, etc. So we see that the purpose of the counting, according to the Chinuch, is a person has to feel that he does not, as of yet, have the Torah. Very fascinating. So at first glance, we don't understand the Chinuch. We have no idea what he's talking about, because after all, the Chinuch is coming now to explain the mitzvah of Sfirat Ha'omer after the Torah was given. This is one of the 613 mitzvahs of the Torah. The chinuch does not say like the Ram says that it's a zecher, it's a remembrance. Commemoration of the counting. The Jewish people counted the days when they left Egypt to go to Har Sinai. That's not what he's saying. And this we do now as a zecher, some sort of commemoration to what they did. And that would be a din d'rabbanan. That would be only an ordinance b'drabbanan. The chinuch says clear that it's Minat Torah, does not say it's a memorial, but on the contrary, he says that is the mitzvah. So we see that the chinuch understood benigle, that we're holding before Matan Torah. How is that possible? We're holding 3,500, 600 years after Matan Torah. The answer is because every year there's a new Matan Torah. It's a reenactment of Har Sinai. We're going to Har Sinai. We have to believe it. But more importantly, we have to experience it and feel it in the depths of our soul. If there's a question about the opinion of the chinuch, so l'chura, any question, any problem with this, his opinion has a simple solution. In addition to us coming to the conclusion that Matan Torah is nischadish every year anew, what we see from the Yetzer Ma'isa mitzvah that the chinuch is right. After all, before one counts in the evening, the Oimel. So halacha l'maisa, the Mishnah Berurah says one must know the day he's counting before the Sphira. So if he knows the information, why does he need a Sphira b'peh? Why does he have to express it verbally, orally? To whom is he counting? To others? He's not counting to others. To himself? But what information is he now giving himself by expressing it orally, by verbalizing it? He already knows the day of the Sphira before the actual act of the Sphira. Therefore, we have to come to the conclusion that the mitzvah Sfiras Ha'omel is not a mitzvah of Sipur Dvarim, of telling me information, but it is a deep, deep yearning and longing. It's an expression of yearning. When is that day going to come? I can't wait any longer. I'm totally impatient. So Sfiras Ha'omel has to be counted with an excitement, because now he's one day closer to Ma'amad Har Sinai, with which he is obligated in the Ma'isa HaMitzvah to express that he's waiting for that great day with breathless anticipation. The Midas Hadin, Rahman al-Itzlan, prevails in the world dafka at a time of preparation for Kabbalah Sateva. As the Chidush Arim points out, that all the Giluyim, all the revelations of Matan Torah, and the Ashras HaShchina on Har Sinai required the koyach of Achdus Yisrael, the Avas Yisrael, the love for a fellow Jew, and to stand united. The Imrei Emes, his grandson already said, B'derech Hasidus, who said in the Haggadah, Misham D'Avaseinu, V'loi echod bilvod, Omad Aleinu L'chaliseinu. When Klal Yisrael is not echod bilvod, one entity, united, indivisible, then we have a danger of Omad Aleinu L'chaliseinu. And it's interesting that the first time the Jewish people came to a complete unity was on Rosh Chodesh Sivan. Like the Pasuk says, by Chodesh HaShlishi, it says, B'nei Yisrael Me'eretz Mitzrayim B'yom Hazeh Bo Midbar Sinai. Vayichad Shom Yisrael neged ha'hol. And the Chazal already point out that it should have said B'yoyim Hahu, B'chodesh HaShlish, on the third month that Jewish people left Mitzrayim, B'yoyim Hazeh, on this day. On that day? What do you mean this day? Today they left Mitzrayim? We're talking about the third month, Rosh Chodesh Sivan. So the Gemara says, B'chol Yom Yiyu Beinecha Kechadoshim. Every day it should be like new. Every day a person has to make sure that he's revitalized, he's enthusiastic, he's emotional. But the question is, for what? So if the Chazal tell us, you are dvorim eile shenochim mitzavcho hayoim al levavecho, shebechol yom v'yom yiyu divrei Torah chadoshim kilu hayom nitno, that we understand, because that we learn from the Parsha of Kriya Shema after Matan Torah. So after Matan Torah, we can understand that a person sometimes becomes rusty, becomes dry, he lacks the enthusiasm, the slivers for Torah mitzvah. So we're told that there's a psychological device that you have to look at it as it's a new ordinance the day it was given. But this is already after Matan Torah. And we have to revitalize ourselves. We very understand that we're dealing here in a time reference of after Matan Torah. Where during the course of the time, both Torah and mitzvahs could become stale. Like the Zohar says, it's a spiritual degeneration that might take place, and psychologically, the only answer is Shiur beinecha kechadoshim. However, b'chodesh HaShlish, we're dealing in a time before Matan Torah, where nothing has yet occurred. So to what is Yiyu Beinecha Kechadoshim, it should be like it's new to you. What is it referring to? So the Chidush Yerim said it was the greatest day in Jewish history. Vayichan Shem Yisrael neged ha'hal. Single. Doesn't say the plural form, it's the single form. Ki ish echad b'leiv echad. And Chazal tell us, Poskazu Hamosa, there was no longer any toxicity in a Jew. The air was purified. There was a catharsis, purification that took place due to the interpersonal relationship of Ish Echod, Belev Echod. And this inspiration that once upon a time the Jewish people, as a prelude and an introduction to Matan Torah, came to a complete unity. So this has to be relived. The feeling, Ish Echod, Belev Echod, which Chidush Yerim explains was as indispensable to Kabbalah Torah. And it's a constant, consistent arousement that has to take place every day. B'yoyim hazeh is today, and it's tomorrow, and it's the day after. It's not only Rosh Chodesh Sivan. And this was the mandate that the Jewish people had from Moshe Rabbeinu to steig in Bein Odom lechaveiro, and interpersonal relationships. And that's why in this siddur we have 49 midos in detail. We have chesed. Each day relates to chesed, gevura, tiferet, netzach, hod, malchus, the yesod in its finest, most minutest detail. Because every day a person, it's 7, and 7 times 7 is 49. So corresponding these 49 days, there has to be a tikkun, not only in diburim, but also in ma'asim. He has to improve himself in those areas. And that's why Lev Yitzhak Barditchev explained there's no countdown, like the Chinuch asked. We're not stop counting down. We're saying that this day, the 4th day, the 5th day, the 30th day, we have been misaken this midah. We're better people. We reached a type of goodness, of kindness. And each day we have to make tikkunim to implement the goal of becoming B'nei Heicholo de Malko. We should join a celestial group of spiritual beings. And it was therefore at the time where the Jewish people are once again preparing for Kabbalah Satira that Midas Hadin struck so disastrously the Talmidim of Rebbe Kiva. We don't know what happened, but for us, we know what our tikkun has to be. And like Chidush Harim points out, Lag Boimer, there's Lamed Beis days. That's connected Leiv. Lamed Beis 32. That's Leiv, and 17 days remain. That's Toiv. So we have to come out with a Leiv Toiv, and only that will render us eligible for Kabbalah Satira. All of the Jewish people are kiguf echad. We have to speak about this at length, so this is not the opportunity. Perhaps we'll speak about it another time. But we have to feel a responsibility, one Jew to another Jew. Rabbi Yisrael Salanta, famous Rabbi Yisrael Salanta, never left the yeshiva. He was always involved in saying Shiur. He was always working with the Talmidim of the yeshiva. Once he disappeared for 2 weeks. Nobody knew where he went. At the end, they found out that it was one of the Talmidim of the yeshiva that unfortunately left the fold. And he went to Paris. He became a stenographer for the Bezdin. In Paris, the courts were opened on Shabbos, and he wrote down the protocol of the case between the litigants. And he was Mechal Shabbos, so Yisrael Salanter found out about it. He went to Paris and he tried to convince him to be Chayze B'tshuva, but he saw that very difficult. So he told him, look, I'm willing to pay you big money for you to take a course in shorthand. Because if you take a course in shorthand, so then on Shabbos, instead of having 1,000 Averos of writing words, so it'll be like marks, and there won't be so many Chayve Krisis. You won't have so many Averos that are Chayev Misa and Chayev Krisis. It took him 2 weeks to convince him to take the course in shorthand, write the protocol on Shabbos in shorthand, and then Motzei Shabbos would decipher it, and he gave him money, a lot of money, that Motzei Shabbos, as if he's working for Rabbi Yisrael Salanter. So the Talmid of Rabbi Yisrael Salanter said that only he really felt that the Jewish people were one group. He actually felt that when one of his Talmidim went off, he has an extra responsibility to him, and his Averos will count, the Averos of the Talmud will count to be his Averos. So he did the maximum he could to prevent such a disaster. Very, very moving story, Rabbi Yisrael Salanta. And in conclusion, we should like to answer Rabbi Reuven Grozovsky's question, why did the Torah, these Tanoim, they were really B'nai Chala de Malko, we don't know what took place, why did it not protect them? It should have been a protection. Torah Magnei Umatzle, Torah protects and saves. So I believe the answer is, I'll be a story of the great Rabbarim Kotler Zechet Tzaddik V'Kodesh Livrocha, that when they wanted to establish Yeshivas Lakewood in the middle of World War II, so Rabbarim Kotler was not interested. He was involved in the Vada Hatzalah, saving Jewish people during the Holocaust. Nevertheless, was 7 Askonim that convinced him to open the yeshiva. So he said he's willing to do it only if it'll be like Kletsk. That was his yeshiva in Europe. Then he wanted Bachrim. Let's just forget about Olam Hazeh and concentrate on learning Torah, gaining Yirah Shamayim, and good midas. So they told Reb Aaron Kotler that you can't have such a thing in America in 1942, 43, because the parents will not send their son to a yeshiva if there's no college. Because at that time, a person needed a BA even if he had a grocery store. So Reb Chaim and Reb Baruch Ber at that time had written a tshuva that college and yeshivas don't go together. It's a question, Bechlal, whether somebody goes to college, whether he'll be able to maintain his normal hashkafa of Torah. So that itself is not acceptable. But in the yeshiva, and of course, Reb Aaron followed the tradition of Reb Baruch Ber, Reb Chaim, no question about that. So he refused. But he was under tremendous tension. Great pressure was exerted. So he said, I would like to ask you 7 people a question. The Gemara says, when Talmidei Rebbe Kiva, they died, 24,000. The world was desolate. Nishkech Torah b'Yisrael, Torah was forgotten. In other words, before Rebbe Kiva, in his old age, came to Rabbi Seinu Shebedorim, came to 5 new Talmidim in the south, all of Eretz Yisrael were Amoratzim. There was no Torah. They died. Immediately following, Torah was forgotten. There were no books. It was not at that time printed. Everything was Baal Peh. So he asked the question, what would be if you would be Bebezdin Shalmalo? You would now be, together with the Kodesh Baruch Hu, in a celestial tribunal, and you'll have to decide what should be the destiny of these 24,000 Talmidim. Shall we kill them because we know Kavod Zelazeh, which we don't understand? Even in the most delicate form, we don't understand it. Or there should be a continuity of Torah, even if it will be a defective Torah. We know, for example, there's Mem Ches Dvarim Shetorah Niknes. There's 48 preliminaries, prerequisites that is required for a person to acquire Torah. Most of them have to do with personal conduct, with character, personality, spiritual, of course, metaphysical. So let's say there was something missing in having noisei ba'olim chaveroi, of identifying with somebody else in a time of trouble, in a time of need. Or oyeves abrius, there was not enough love that was extended to a person's fellow man. So we would have, instead of 48 prerequisites, 47, 46. So what's better? That a defective Torah should be transmitted to the next generation? Or if subsequent to the death of these 24,000 Talmidim, Torah was forgotten, so we have a Dor V'Amaratzim, there's no Torah. So what's going to be the next generation? The next generation is going to be a generation that will be totally assimilated. And the Jewish people will cease to exist as a unique nation. They'll be totally assimilated with the Goyim, and it'll be the end of Am Yisrael, of the Jewish people. So what would you have said? So they all answered, honestly, we would say it's better that there should be a transmission of a defective Torah than the total destruction of the Jewish people and the Torah. So the Baron Kotler said, what does the Gemara say? that it was preferable not to have a transmission of defective Torah, even if the result will be a total assimilation of the Jewish people and a destruction of the Torah and a destruction of the Jewish race. A miracle took place that in his old age, said the Baron Cutler, the Bekiva, who did so much for the Jewish people, nevertheless made a last-ditch effort to go and find 5 new Talmidim, and from them we have Torah. We can imagine what would be the Torah we would have if there was 24,000 Talmidim. We would have 10,000 Shasim. What did Aaron Cutler mean with this? That in Torah we do not make compromises. We cannot compromise the unassailable integrity of the Torah. HaKadosh Baruch Hu does not want a defective Torah should be transmitted. So they asked them, but look at the alternative. So the Baron Cutler said, on Memches Dvarim, without Midas Tevis B'Shleimus, without having a complete, perfect interpersonal relationships between the Talmidim, so HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't need such a Torah, and he does not need such a Jewish nation. Now we all know the rest is history. We know of the great Mifal HaTorah that Rav Aaron Cutler established in Lakewood. This is the answer to Reb Reuven Grozovsky's question. How could it be that the Torah did not protect themselves or Klal Yisrael? That was in mortal danger of extinction. Answer is, without a complete Memches Dvarim Shatayra Niknes B'hem, complete. Kadosh Baruch Hu doesn't need a Torah, and he does not need a Am Yisrael. Hello.